Alright, welcome back guys. In the last video we saw a whole high-level overview of exactly what we're going to be trying to implement. And now in this video we're going to actually start with the implementation phase. So in particular in this video I want to do a lot of the initial setup because there's quite a bit to set up initially, so that's what we're going to tackle in this video. I'm also going to go over some of the environment stuff you need to follow along. It's not too complicated because the only thing we're going to be building is the backend API for this application. So in particular you're going to need Python on your system. So in my case, the version of Python I'm using is 3.9.6. If you use this version, fine. And if not, then just use something that's at least somewhat up to date. And then you're also going to want a text editor. So in my case, I'm using VS Code. And then in my opinion, this is the best text editor, so I'd recommend using this. Although if you want to use something else, you can. I just like this text editor because it has a lot of handy built-in things like this built-in terminal, where you can have multiple sessions straight from here, so you don't have to have a separate terminal session open with something like iTerm or whatever you use. And then on top of that, you have a lot of handy extensions as well. So that's the reason why I prefer to use this. And then you're also going to want a way to make API requests. So to do that, I'm going to be using Postman. So you can either run this application through the browser, or you can install the Postman desktop app, and in my case, that's what I use. You can do it either way. So if you don't have Postman, just go on Google, search for Postman, and then you can go ahead, sign up, use it from the browser interface, or just download the desktop app, whatever you prefer. And then the last thing we're going to need is our database. So I'm using PostgreSQL for my database, so you're going to want to go ahead and search for that, and then install it on your system. So if you're using Mac OS, you can use Postgre app. So that's what I use. It's a very nice way to manage PostgreSQL. And then it gives you this little thing up here where you can open Postgres, and then you can go double click here, and then you can open up a session. Now, if you're on Windows, you can't do this. So you're just going to want to go ahead, download the Windows installer. And then once you go through the process of installing that, you're going to be able to install the command line tools. So you can go into your command line and then write something like psql-u Postgres. And that's one way you can open the session. And then you can also have pgadmin that you install, and then that will also give you a graphical user interface that you can use as well. So anyway, I'm going to deal with this PostgreSQL stuff a little later. For now, let's go back to our application and start putting this together. So first thing I'm going to want is a virtual environment. So that way when I install pip packages, they're not installed on my global system, but instead inside this virtual environment. So to do that, I can do python 3-m venv, and then the name of the folder, which I'll call venv. So I'm going to have everything inside of this directory, which I called listings, which is going to be the name of this application. So now that I have this virtual environment, the next step I'm going to do is I'm going to activate it. So I can do that with source venv bin activate, and then also have to make sure I spell source correctly. So let's try that one more time. And there we go. So now that I see this, my virtual environment's activated. If you're on Windows, do something like /venv/scripts/activate. There you go. So if you run something like this, then that should install your virtual environment for you. So now that I have my virtual environment activated, now I can install my pip dependencies. So I can do pip install, and then I'm going to need Django. I'm going to need Django Rest Framework. I'm going to need Pillow. So Django is just to have the actual Django framework. Django Rest Framework is what we can use to conveniently make a backend REST API with Django. Pillow is so that I can have image uploads. And then I'm also going to want PSY-COPG2, and that way I can communicate with the PostgreSQL database. And then one final thing I'm going to need is just a package to make authentication a little bit easier. So that's going to be Django Rest Framework -simple JWT. So I'm going to click enter to that, and that's going to go ahead and install all these packages for me. So I'm just going to go ahead and let that finish up. All right, so that all wrapped up. So I'm just going to go ahead, clear this terminal. And then the next thing I want to do is make a Django project. So to do that, I can now run Django-admin because I installed the Django package. Then I can run the command start project, and then the name of this project. So if I call it something like listings, that might be a little bit confusing because I'm also going to have a listing app. So instead I'm just going to call this something like core, and then I'm going to put in the current directory. So I'm going to do that with a dot. So I'm going to go ahead, create that. So now we should see that pop up here. There we go. We have this core, which is my project. And then now I have this manage.py, which I can use to make my apps. Now there's different ways that you can structure apps. Sometimes what you see is an app folder made inside of here, where then you put the apps inside of there. But I'm just going to put everything kind of in this same directory of this listings. So that's the way I'm going to manage things. So I'm going to go ahead, create these apps. So I'm going to need one for managing my users. So now I can do python manage.py. Start app is the command I can run to create an app. And then the name of this app is going to be user. So that's going to be my user app, or user service, if you will. This is going to manage everything to do with users. And then I'm also going to have one for my listings. So I'm going to call this app listing and click enter to that. So now I have these two apps right here. Now another thing we're going to need is our databases set up. So I'm going to have one database for the users and one database for the listings. So let's go ahead and create those. So to do that, I can either go here, open this Postgres, and then just double click to open a session. And then once again, if you're on Windows, and also if you're on Mac, you can do the same thing, just PSQL-U, and then Postgres, and that'll also open up that session. I'm gonna go ahead and remove this because right now we're inside of this shell right here, which is for Postgres, so of course that's not a real command in here. And now let's create these two databases. So create database, and I'm gonna call this listings, if I spell this right, listings, and then users. That's gonna be the name of my database. And I'm gonna set the owner to be my Postgre user, and then put my semicolon and click enter. So that's gonna create this database. And then I'm also gonna have my listings database. So I'm just gonna press the up arrow key, and then I'm gonna change this name to be listings, which is the name of this, I guess, real estate company, and then listings, which is gonna be this database. I'm gonna click enter to that. So now I have these two databases created. I can do a /L to list these out. So I have this one right here I just made, and this one right here. And then I can quit out of here with /Q. Also, another thing you can do is you can set a password. So you can do this /password, click enter, and that way you can create a password since this is something you're gonna need to do. And then quit out of here again, /Q, enter, and there we go. So now that I have my two databases created, now let's go ahead and start setting this up. So I'm gonna open up this core, settings.py, and let's start to configure some of these things. First off, I'm gonna go into this installed apps, and I'm gonna bring in a few things here. So first of all, I'm gonna need Rest Framework. I'm gonna need those two apps I just created. So my user app, as well as my listing app. And then that's all I'm gonna bring into here. Then I'm gonna go down to my database settings. Now here is where we're gonna see how to set up multiple databases. So we have a default database, but another thing you can do in Django is you can set this default as an empty dictionary like this, because in Django you need to have a default database, but if you don't want to use this default, then you can just have it like so. But you do need to include this here. And then I'm gonna have one of the databases, which I'm gonna call users. So this is what I'm gonna be referring to it as. And then this is going to be a dictionary. And then here, I'm gonna have the engine. And then as for the engine, what you wanna put is django.db.backends.postgresql. So this is gonna ensure that we're using PostgreSQL for our database. And then we're gonna want the name. So it's gonna be the name of the database. So I called it listings_users. And also have to make sure I spell this correctly. So listings users. And then the password, which in my case is just password123. So again, that's what that /password command that I showed previously. And then the final thing we need to pass is also the user. So for the user, I'll put it, say right here. And this is my Postgre user. And then another thing you can include is also this host property. You can set it to localhost. So you can do this, but you also don't need to. So in my case, I guess I'll just leave it out. So that's gonna be for my first database. And then my next database is gonna be my listings database. So I'm gonna refer to this as listings. So this is also gonna be a dictionary. And to make this easier, I'm just gonna copy all of this in here, paste it in here, and we're gonna tweak it. So the engine's gonna be the exact same. We're gonna be using PostgreSQL for both of these databases. The name of this database is gonna be listings. So listings_listings, because that's what we named it in PostgreSQL. The user is Postgres, and then the password's the exact same. So there we go. It's as easy as this to define our two databases. And then once again, make sure to have this default here. Even though we're not using it, it is required to have it here. So I'm gonna save that. And then the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna scroll down. So we have some settings to set down here. So in particular, I'm gonna want a media URL. This is gonna be /media/. So this is gonna be the URL where our media files are accessible. And then another thing I'm gonna want is media root. And this is going to be os.path.join, base directory, and media. So this right here is going to be where this media folder is going to be stored, where we have our different media files. And then also OS isn't installed by default, so we also have to scroll to the top and make sure we import that. So I'm going to import OS right at the top here and save that. All right, so that's going to be our first settings right here. So this is going to deal with our images, and that's, once again, also why we have that pillow package, because that's what also lets us install images and do all of this stuff here. Then I'm also going to want my REST framework settings. So I'm going to have REST_framework. This is going to be a dictionary. And then in here, I'm going to have default permission classes. And that's going to be a list. And then in here, I'm going to have REST framework .permissions.is authenticated. So by default, my views, I want you to be required to be authenticated. And if I want the permissions to be otherwise, then I'm going to set it in the view itself. So that's going to be for the permission classes. Now I'm also going to have default authentication classes. All right, so then for my default authentication classes, I'm going to have REST Framework underscore simple jwt.authentication.jwt authentication. So make sure you spell this correctly. And this is going to ensure that we're using that JWT package that we installed, so the REST Framework simple JWT. And that's what's going to manage the authentication in this application. And then the next thing I'm going to do is also have some settings. So this is for the simple JWT package. You have the simple JWT setting you can set. And in here we can set a couple things. We're not going to go too deep with this. I'm just going to have access token lifetime. And then that I'm going to set to time delta. And then I'm going to set minutes equals 230. And then also have to make sure I import time delta. So I'm going to scroll to the top of this file. And right below this OS import, I'm going to do from date time, import time delta. So now I have this inside of this file. So I'm going to go back down. So that's my first setting. So this is going to be how long it takes for the access tokens to expire. And then the next setting I create is going to be very similar to this. So I'm just going to copy this, paste it. So this next one's going to be the refresh token lifetime. And then for that one, I'm just going to do days equals 1. So that's going to make the refresh token expire after 1 day. And then the next setting I'm going to have is my auth header types. And here I'm going to have a tuple. That's just bear. So this way I'm using bear tokens. And then below that, I'm going to have one final setting, which is going to be auth token classes. And I'm going to have a tuple once again, where I have REST Framework simple JWT .tokens.access token. Then also make sure to have commas here, because with tuples in Python, you have to make sure if you have one item, you have a comma. So I'm going to go ahead and include that. And then that's going to be everything we do from the setting side of things here. So keep in mind, we don't have anything under these template settings because we won't be using any templates in this project. We won't be having any kind of front-end framework. This is strictly going to be a back-end API we're developing. So now the next thing I'm going to do is set up these urls.py. So I'm going to open that up. I'm going to remove these comments. And then let's go ahead and get started on this. So below here, I'm going to import a few things. So from REST Framework, simple jwt.views, I want to import a few views that I'm going to use. I'm going to have a token obtain pair view. I'm going to have a token refresh view. Oh, not this. Token refresh view, this one. And I'm also going to have a token verify view. So I'm going to use these three class-based views, and then I'm going to make some API endpoints so that we can hit these. So I'm going to have a path, which is going to be API/token/. And then this one here is going to use that token obtain pair view. So I'm going to paste that in here, do a .as view, because this is a class-based view. And then I'm going to do a shift option down key 2 times just to copy this down twice, because I'm going to have 2 more endpoints that are kind of similar to this. So this one here is going to be API/token/refresh/. And this is going to use that token refresh view. So I'm going to copy that and paste it here. So that's this one right here. And then finally, I'm going to have one last one, which is going to be API/token/verify/. And let's make sure we spell verify correctly. So verify, there we go. And this one's going to use the token verify view. So just like that, we have now JSON Web Token authentication all set up in this application. So when I hit this right here, if I pass a username and a password to this, that's going to allow me to get back and access in a refresh token. This right here, I can pass a refresh token to, and it's going to pass me back a new access token. And then this right here, I can use to verify whether the access token is still valid. So these 3 endpoints right here is what I can use to manage my authentication using JSON Web Tokens. And then also this right here, I mentioned that you can pass a username and a password. So that's what you do by default. But because we're going to be creating a custom user model, we're going to make the login be an email and a password instead. So once we do that, we're instead going to pass an email and a password to this endpoint. And if the credentials are correct, then we're going to get back a new access and refresh token. And then that's what we're going to be using to manage our authentication and authorization in this application. All right, so there we are. We've done a lot of the initial setup now. We created our project, our 2 apps. We set up these settings. We set up the authentication in our application. Now, there's still going to be a little bit more to the authentication because in particular, this user app, we're going to make some views. We're going to make one to register an account because this right here doesn't give us a means to do that. And we're also going to have a view that we create, which is going to let us retrieve our user. So those are 2 views we're going to make. And we're also going to create our custom user model. And then once we do that, then we're going to see also how to migrate this custom user model to our users database that we created. Because right now we created those 2 databases, but we still didn't migrate anything to them. So we're going to see how to start doing that stuff in our next video, because our next video is going to be all about creating our custom user model and then seeing how we can migrate this custom user model to our users database. So anyway, that's going to be everything for this video. So hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you haven't yet, please hit that like button. It goes a long way to help a channel like mine grow and get recognized so others can benefit from the videos I release as well. Also, I have links in the description that you can check out. I have one for an e-commerce course that you can check out if you're interested in learning to develop an application like that. I also have a link for joining my Web Development Kings Facebook group. That way, if you want to personally ask me something, you can go right ahead and do that, and I'll happily help you out. Doesn't cost you anything, so if you're scratching your head about something, then you can go right ahead and ask me to help you out. Only questions I probably won't answer if you want me to help you build some kind of personal project, as I don't quite have the time for that sort of thing, but anything else is fair game. You can also post something in the group itself, that way other developers in the group can help you out with something as well. The group is all about growing your expertise as a developer, so if you're interested in that, then go ahead and click that link in the description and join the family. Also, if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button, turn on those notification bells, that way you don't miss out when I release a new video, and I'll see you in the next one.